The Bobcat jumped onto the tow truck just as Ryan Voss shifted into drive, landing on the steel side rail with a thud that made him slam the brakes so hard his coffee hit the windshield. And for one stunned second, he thought he was hallucinating from too little sleep, until the Wildcat spun toward the ditch, let out a harsh, urgent cry, and he realized it wasn't attacking at all. It was trying to stop him from leaving. The call had come in a little after 4:30 a.m., one of those half-formed dispatch messages that sound routine until you get there. Single vehicle slide-off on County Route 18 near Miller's Cut. No injuries reported, vehicle abandoned, possible retrieval needed before the morning commute. Ryan had been on overnight duty for Holloway Recovery for 6 years, and knew the road well enough to picture the scene before he arrived. Route 18 ran through a stretch of low timber and marshy shoulders where fog pooled before sunrise, and in spring the ditches stayed soft and slick even after a dry week. It was the kind of road that punished anyone who took the curve too fast, and then pretended not to know why they ended up nose first in weeds. Ryan was 39, broad-backed, unshaven by noon even on his best days, and the sort of man people trusted because he did not waste words. He lived alone above the garage, kept odd hours, and had a quiet kindness that mostly showed up in practical forms. Jump starts in grocery lots, waived fees for stranded teenagers, extra straps and blankets for farmers, hauling things they definitely shouldn't have tried to haul. By the time he rolled the flatbed into Miller's Cut, dawn was still only a gray suggestion behind the trees. The fog sat low over the ditch line, and the whole scene looked blurred at the edges. The abandoned car, a dented blue sedan, had slid off the shoulder and settled at an angle in a shallow embankment. Front wheels sunk in mud, rear bumper twisted, but mostly intact. No driver, no hazard lights, no one around. Ryan parked on the shoulder, set cones, switched on his amber strobes, and did what he always did first: walked the scene. He checked for leaking fuel, looked for downed lines, scanned the tire tracks, and judged the angle for a clean winch pull. The ground sucked at his boots. Somewhere out in the reeds, a red-winged blackbird called once, and then went quiet again. "Should be 20 minutes," he muttered to nobody, already planning breakfast and maybe an hour of sleep before the next call ruined both. He lowered the flatbed, grabbed the winch remote, and worked efficiently. Cable out. Hook point secured. Slow tension. The sedan lurched, mud slurped, and then the front wheels climbed free enough for him to drag it into line. He was halfway through the pull when he noticed movement at the edge of the ditch on the far side of the road. At first, he assumed deer. Then the shape came low and fast through the fog and stopped near his rear wheels. A bobcat. Ryan froze with the winch remote in his hand. He had seen bobcats before in the county, usually as quick flashes crossing a tree line at dusk. Never this close and never lingering near a running truck. This one was an adult female, he guessed, lean and rain-dark along the back from dew-soaked grass, ears tipped black, eyes bright and fixed not on him but on the tow truck itself. It paced along the side of the flatbed in short, agitated bursts, looked toward the ditch, then back at the truck, then paced again. "Hey," Ryan said instinctively, lowering the winch speed. "Easy. Get out of here." The bobcat didn't leave. It made a rough, rasping sound, almost like a cough sharpened into a warning, and moved closer. Ryan backed up a step, more startled than afraid. Wildcats didn't come up to idling trucks. They especially didn't stay there with lights flashing and metal clanking. He scanned the ditch, thinking maybe there was roadkill or a den nearby. He saw only wet grass, scrub willow, and a tangle of storm-thrown branches farther down the embankment. The bobcat paced harder, cut around the back of the truck, then stopped again near the passenger side rail. Ryan shook his head. Nope, not dealing with this before coffee. He finished winching the sedan onto the bed, secured the rear wheels, and climbed into the cab, planning to call animal control once he was clear. He had just shifted into drive when the Bobcat launched. It sprang from the shoulder onto the truck's side step and then onto the steel rail behind the cab in one fluid motion, claws ringing on metal. Ryan yelped, stomped the brake, and swore loud enough to fog the inside of the windshield. The Bobcat whipped its head toward the passenger window, not striking, not trying to enter, just glaring, breathing hard, then twisting to stare down toward the ditch and vocalizing again, harsher now, urgent and repeated. Ryan stared back, heart hammering. What in God's name? The cat jumped back to the ground, ran several yards toward the ditch, stopped, looked back at him, and cried out again. Then it returned to the truck, circled, and repeated the move. Even through his adrenaline, Ryan felt the shift from fear to baffled focus. It wasn't random aggression, it was directional. It wanted him to look somewhere. He killed the gear, grabbed his handheld flashlight, and climbed out slowly, keeping the truck between himself and the Bobcat at first. "You don't get to do that again," he said shakily, though his voice had softened. The Bobcat was already at the ditch edge, pacing near a dense patch of cattails broken by runoff. It looked at him, then lowered its head toward the brush, and made the same rasping call. Ryan moved closer, careful and deliberate. The embankment there was steeper than it looked from the road, cut by rain channels and hidden holes. His boots slid once in the mud. He angled the flashlight beam through the reeds and caught a flash of reflective plastic, twisted wire, and something blue. A child's backpack. He frowned and stepped down another 2 feet. The smell changed immediately. Wet earth, swamp water, and the sharp chemical tang of hot plastic. He swept the beam left and saw the problem. Half hidden under a collapsed section of roadside snow fence and a tangle of branches was a small battery-powered scooter, the kind kids rode around subdivisions and bike paths. One wheel was still spinning weakly, jammed against brush. Beside it, almost completely obscured by reeds and mud-dark weeds, a little girl was trapped on her side in the ditch, one leg pinned beneath the scooter frame and fence wire. Ryan's stomach dropped. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. Her pink rain jacket was soaked black with ditch water and mud. One cheek was streaked with dirt. Her eyes were open but glassy, and when the flashlight hit her face, she flinched and made a tiny sound that was more breath than word. "Hey! Hey, kiddo! I see you!" Ryan was moving before he finished speaking. The Bobcat darted back up the slope, circling but staying close, vocalizing in short bursts that now sounded less like warning and more like raw stress. Ryan crouched in the mud, setting the flashlight where it lit the ditch without blinding the girl. "I'm Ryan. Tow truck. You're okay. I've got you." It was the automatic lie adults tell children in emergencies, and he hated himself for saying it because he didn't know if she was okay at all. He checked fast, breathing rapid but present. No obvious heavy bleeding, lips pale, hands cold. The scooter's deck and a bent metal fence stake had trapped her lower leg. She whimpered when he touched the frame. "Hurts," she whispered. "I know. Don't move. Just stay with me." He snatched his phone and called 911, voice turning clipped and sharp, in a way dispatchers respect immediately. "This is Ryan Voss with Holloway Recovery on County 18 at Miller's Cut. I've got a pediatric patient in the ditch, trapped under a scooter and debris, conscious, cold, possible leg injury, maybe longer exposure. Need EMS and sheriff now." Dispatch came alive at once. "Copy, sir. Units en route. Can you advise age and whether the roadway is blocked?" Ryan gave what he could, glancing repeatedly at the child and the embankment. His mind raced through possibilities. How had no one reported this? Then he remembered the abandoned sedan. A parent? A passerby? Unrelated? The road was dark, foggy, and easy to miss a ditch line if someone went down after another driver had already called in the obvious vehicle and left. Or maybe the kid had crashed after the car incident and never been seen at all. None of that mattered yet. The girl's teeth were chattering. Ryan ripped off his work jacket and tucked it around her shoulders as best he could without moving her leg. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mia," she whispered after a pause. "Hi, Mia. You did good. You stayed where you were." She tried to cry and only managed a shaky breath. "I was trying to find my dog." Ryan looked up involuntarily toward the road. And the bobcat, standing just above them in the fog, staring down, ears forward, chest heaving. For a second, the world felt tilted. "Okay," he said carefully. "We'll worry about your dog after we get you out." He needed to free her enough to improve circulation and keep her from sliding deeper into the water, but he didn't want to worsen a fracture. The scooter frame was light aluminum, bent and hooked into the old fence panel. Ryan had pry bars and cutters in the truck, but getting them would mean leaving her. He looked at the bobcat again, absurdly, as if expecting advice. The cat paced 2 steps and looked toward the truck. "Yeah," Ryan muttered. "Tools. Right." He climbed the slope at a run, grabbed bolt cutters, a small pry bar, and a wool-moving blanket from the cab, then hustled back down. The bobcat stayed nearby the whole time, never interfering, never leaving. Ryan worked low and fast, narrating each move to Mia so she wouldn't panic. "I'm cutting the wire first. This'll make noise. Then I lift the scooter a little, not your leg. You tell me if it gets worse, okay?" She nodded weakly. The first cut snapped loud in the fog. The bobcat flinched, but held position. Ryan cut 2 more wire loops, then used the pry bar to lift the scooter deck just enough to slide the blanket under Mia's hip and shoulders, getting insulation between her and the freezing mud. When he shifted the frame, she cried out, a real scream this time, thin and terrified. I know, almost there." He saw the problem then. Her ankle was twisted badly, likely broken or badly sprained, and the scooter's rear fork had pinned her boot against the root of a willow sapling. He freed the fork, stabilized her leg with both hands, and eased the scooter clear. "Got it. You're free, Mia. Don't try to sit up." She sobbed once and reached for his sleeve with muddy fingers. Ryan squeezed her hand, then checked his phone timer. EMS should have been there by now. He could hear sirens faintly through the fog, still distant but coming fast. He looked up at the road again and finally let himself feel the adrenaline in full. If he had simply loaded the abandoned sedan and driven off on schedule, the girl could have stayed hidden in that ditch another hour, maybe longer. The cold alone might have done what the crash hadn't. Above him, the bobcat gave one lower, quieter rasp and sat back on its haunches at the edge of the slope, watching. Mia noticed it then. Her eyes widened. "Kitty," she whispered. Ryan almost laughed from sheer shock. "That is not what we're calling it, but yes." The first sheriff's deputy arrived in under 10 minutes, sliding to a stop behind the tow truck with lights splashing red and blue through the fog. Deputy Carla Nguyen jogged down the embankment with a trauma bag, took in the scene, the child, Ryan in the mud, bolt cutters, scooter, and a bobcat sitting 10 feet away like a grim little supervisor, and stopped dead. "Ryan," she said carefully, "why is there a bobcat at your rescue scene?" Ryan didn't look up from Mia. Long story, important supporting role. Carla, who had worked rural calls long enough to shelve questions until later, nodded once and knelt beside the girl. "Hi, sweetheart, I'm Carla. We're going to warm you up and keep that ankle still." More units arrived fast after that. EMS, with a pediatric kit, then volunteer fire for extra hands on the embankment. Ryan backed out of the primary care position once medics took over, but stayed close when they asked him to hold a light and then to help stabilize the blanket during the move to the stretcher. Mia cried when they splinted her ankle, and then calmed when Carla kept talking to her about school, cartoons, and whether her dog was big or small. "Small?" Mia sniffled. "Beagle. Peanut." Deputy Nguyen glanced toward the abandoned sedan on the truck bed and then at Ryan. Dispatch is checking if she was reported missing. We also have a possible domestic disturbance call from 2 miles south around midnight involving a parent who left the scene on foot after a slide-off. Might connect. Ryan felt anger flare hot and immediate, but he shoved it aside. Later. Right now, the girl was alive. Through all of it, the Bobcat remained near the ditch line, shifting positions when people moved too close, but never bolting fully into the trees. The medics noticed. The firefighters noticed. One volunteer whispered, "Should we haze it off before we lift?" Carla looked at the animal, then at Mia, then at Ryan's mud-streaked face. If it hasn't caused trouble yet, don't make some. When the stretcher finally came up the slope and the ambulance doors closed, Mia reached a hand toward Ryan through the blanket and asked in a small, drowsy voice, "Did the kitty get you?" Ryan swallowed around a lump in his throat and nodded. "Yeah, it did." The ambulance pulled away with lights cutting through the lifting fog. The sheriff's deputy stayed to take Ryan's statement while another unit canvassed the roadside for signs of the missing dog and any personal items. Ryan explained the sequence twice because it sounded ridiculous even while he was saying it. The pacing, the jump onto the tow truck, the repeated runs to the ditch. Carla wrote it all down with the expression of someone trying to keep a straight face in front of facts she could not argue with. "So you're telling me," she said at last, pen hovering, "a wild bobcat physically prevented you from leaving the scene?" Ryan looked at the steel rail on his truck, where fresh claw marks scored the paint. That part's not really up for debate. Carla actually smiled then, brief and tired. Fair enough. When they turned to look for the bobcat again, it was gone. No dramatic farewell, no pause at the road edge. Just gone, as if the animal had stepped back into the fog and let the human machinery take over once the child was found. Searchers found Peanut the beagle before full daylight, shivering but unharmed beneath a culvert 20 yards from where Mia had gone down. By mid-morning, the story was all over Hollow County. It spread the way true stories do in small places. Badly at first, then with corrections, then with embellishments no one could quite resist. By lunch, someone at the diner was calling it the tow truck Bobcat miracle. Ryan hated the phrase and refused every request to reenact where the cat had jumped. But he did confirm one thing to anyone who asked seriously. Mia was at County General, cold and badly shaken, but stable, with a fractured ankle and no internal injuries. Deputy Nguyen later filled in the missing pieces. Mia had apparently slipped out of a stopped car during a chaotic argument after the sedan skidded into the ditch, chasing after Peanut when the dog bolted into the fog. The adult driver left on foot, reportedly to get help, and never mentioned the child to the first person he contacted. By the time anyone sorted out the timelines, Ryan was already on scene loading the car and nearly about to leave. "If you had rolled out on schedule," Carla said quietly that evening when she stopped by Holloway Recovery with paperwork for the damaged fence and scooter chain of custody. Ryan nodded once. "I know." He could still feel the impact of the bobcat landing on the truck through the steering wheel and seat, still hear the claws on steel. He had washed the mud off his boots and hands, but the scene remained in him with unnatural clarity. The pink jacket in reeds, the fog, the cat pacing above the ditch. "You ever seen anything like it?" Carla asked. Ryan leaned against the garage bay and looked out toward the road beyond the lot where twilight was settling in. "I've seen animals do smart things. I've seen dogs drag people, horses find their barns, cats show up where they're needed. But that?" He shook his head. "That cat knew I was leaving, and it made sure I didn't." In the weeks that followed, Mia recovered well. Her mother, who had been out of town that night and arrived to the hospital halfway through the morning in a panic that hollowed out her face, brought Ryan a handwritten note and a paper bag of store-bought cookies he pretended not to appreciate and then ate all of by the next day. Mia's note, written in uneven pencil with a few misspellings and a drawing of a huge spotted cat on top of a tow truck, read, "Thank you for helping me, and thank you to the Bobcat, too. Tell her Peanut is okay." Ryan taped it inside the cab above the visor, where no one saw it unless he wanted them to. County road crews eventually repaired the ditch edge and replaced the old snow fence. Ryan's truck kept the claw marks for months because he never got around to repainting the rail, and maybe because he didn't really want to. Every time someone in the yard asked about them, he said, "Job hazard," until Carla started answering for him. Wildlife supervisor incident. He rolled his eyes but never corrected her. He drove Miller's Cut again a dozen times that spring and always slowed a little at the curve, scanning the ditch line and the reeds before focusing on the road ahead. Once, near sunset, weeks later, he spotted a bobcat on the far shoulder just beyond the willow patch, sitting in the grass and watching traffic with that same unnervingly steady posture. It might have been the same female or another entirely. Ryan knew better than to pretend certainty about wild things. He pulled over for a second anyway, engine idling, and looked across the road while the cat looked back. "We got her," he said through the open window, feeling ridiculous and not caring. "Kid's okay." The bobcat blinked once, turned, and slipped into the cattails without a sound. Ryan sat there a moment longer with the amber lights ticking over the empty road, then eased back into gear and drove on, carrying with him the hard-earned habit the cat had forced into him. When something wild stands in your path and refuses to let you continue, maybe, just maybe, it's worth stopping long enough to look where it keeps trying to point.